Hey, everybody, it's great to see you again, and welcome back to the Conservation Conversation, where we like to talk to people around the world that are putting everything on the line to make a difference, because we are all one big community. So it's great to have everybody here today, and we have a very, very special guest, and I just want to get right into it. Today, what we're going to be talking about is the relationship of humans and animals and that changing nature of that relationship and how the nature of that relationship needs to change and grow in order for us to save our animals. So I'm very excited for today's show. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Remember, it's our world. Let's talk about it. All right, and very excited today. We have an amazing photojournalist who has broken so many stories that I'm sure everybody here is familiar with in our conservation circle. And real quick, before we get to him, what I wanted to talk about is recently a report came out showing that around 68% of the species numbers have declined, and we are seeing a massive decline and an acceleration towards extinction of many species. So a lot of times that happens because the species are not in our common mind, they're not in our day-to-day life, and we don't know the problems that they face throughout and through. So one of the things we really need to do is change our relationship on how we think about animals and how we relate to animals and what we can learn from animals. And, you know, one of the most important things is what our next guest does is to bring us the images, the stories, and the pictures that we're never able to uncover. Here we are at our house, but he's going to show you not only what's happening out there, but ways that we can make a difference. So please welcome our guest today, Aaron Gekoski. Aaron, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. So even before we get into the photographs and where we're headed, I'm curious, you know, I was reading that you had sort of more of a corporate life and you're working in a modeling agency, and then you had a change of heart. What happened, and how did you end up where you are now with the animals?
Yeah, I followed kind of the standard route that many people do in the UK. So, you know, you go to university and then you get a corporate job. I was actually a copywriter working with ad agencies, and then I started a modeling agency with my best friend from school, which in your 20s is quite good fun. But then, you know, you quickly start to realize my hair gets blonder, my skin gets more orange, my teeth get whiter, and I didn't like what I was seeing in the mirror. So decided in my late 20s to follow a childhood dream, and I'd always been obsessed by David Attenborough and BBC documentaries. England is kind of the epicenter of wildlife filmmaking. So bought a cheap camera and sold my business and headed off to Africa, where I did a wildlife filmmaking course. And then I quickly, so my idea was to get more into natural history filmmaking. But when I was in Africa, I started to see that the world wasn't quite as it seemed on those BBC documentaries. And actually, everywhere you looked, animals are being, you know, hunted, abused, exploited by humanity. So I started to turn my camera on some of those subjects, and the rest is history. I think that was 10 years ago, and since then I've been traveling around the world and documenting human-animal conflict as a filmmaker and as a photographer.
Now, I know when you're in the field, you see a lot of really difficult things. You know, there's things you share, and then there are things that, you know, you don't even actually fully share, you know, story-wise, sometimes even image-wise. But what was one of the first events or one of the first series of photographs that you took that really had that profound emotional impact on you?
Yeah, without a doubt. It was the first proper assignment that I did was after going to filmmaking school in South Africa. I went to Mozambique, and I went to learn about diving and about the ocean and do my dive master. And I met a couple of guys who were making a documentary about shark finning. So I spent 2 years working with those guys, and we did the first ever documentary about shark finning there, sponsored by WWF. And it looked at the kind of the 3,000-kilometer coastline along Mozambique that is just being hammered by Chinese vessels, and by local middlemen who are incentivizing the fishermen to try and catch sharks. So we would go and we would spend time in those communities, and we would document the locals catching sharks. And you know, you're in a remote shark finning camp in the middle of Mozambique, and you're living in a straw hut next to a chicken coop, and you're going out every single day with these fishermen in their small rowing boats, documenting them trying to catch sharks. I mean, it used to be very easy for them, and these days it's become a lot harder, and they really don't catch many sharks anymore, mainly because of the industrial fishing vessels. So that was really my first set of images, where I didn't really know what I was doing with the camera. I was kind of trying to teach myself. But then I got the shots back and looked at them on the computer and realized I had a very powerful set of images, and then started sending them to magazines and got a huge response from them, and got them published in FHM and Africa Geographic and loads of different platforms. So that was really the first time, and still some of those images, they're some of my favorite shots. In fact, one of them nearly made the cover of my new book that's coming out. But instead it's the opening chapter. That was really my gateway into the world of documenting human-animal conflict.
Now, it's interesting because that's one thing when we tell the stories, and you're kind of saying there's like sort of the National Geographic version, the beautiful, that's when, they go and they have these huge budgets, but people like us tend to go into the villages, live with the people, live with the locals, experience the situation and the context in which a lot of these people are trying to survive. And finding that, I think poverty is often a driver in a lot of these circles. And so as you kind of go into it, you find it's very complicated gray as far as bad guys, good guys, and the way forward, I was going to ask, a little bit about, what you thought about that, as far as once you're with the people that are, especially, for example, in the Philippines, we had the massive ships doing 60 million pounds of fish a night. And then you had the guy with the small, teeny boat, the banca, and he's catching like 3. It's like you were talking about the industrial sort of, sucks it out. Do you think that, how can we sort of approach this animal human relationship with a different perspective after what you've seen out there?
Yeah, like you touched upon, a lot of the time people like this are demonized, and we demonize shark fishermen or people working in wet markets or people involved in the factory farming industry. And it's very easy for us to sit here in our living rooms and to cast aspersions, but actually until you've been in these people's shoes, it's very difficult to imagine what life is like for, say, a shark fisherman. And there are very limited options available to them, and also when you're rewarded so handsomely compared to catching fish traditionally. So a Mozambican fisherman might make $50 a week just traditionally fishing, whereas if they target sharks, they can make $200 for a single large shark's fins. And if you have a family of 5 to feed, what would you do? And the word endangered really doesn't matter. It's the people don't care whether an animal is endangered or not if they're hungry. There was actually a great line in the Ivory game, and they kept catching this guy who'd been poaching, and he just said the word. He's like a hungry belly is a great motivator. So I think it's all very easy for us, and we're going out and shopping at Marks and Spencer's, and we have enough money and resources. But when you're in these people's shoes, then you will think very differently.
It's a very good point. Most of us have the luxury of buying our food in a market, and a lot of the people that that I've run into, either they hunt and fish to survive, or they do it for the market. And unfortunately, Chinese medicine market was a big motivator for a lot of the poorer fishermen and crabbers and stuff that we found.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the industries that I cover, and again, that you said that they're not just a case of black and white, and there's many shades of grey. When you're dealing with traditions and history and You try telling an elderly Vietnamese woman who is dying of cancer that rhino horn isn't going to help her. You're not going to get very far, because that's what people have been led to believe for many years now. I think what I have the most problem with is the industries that are overtly and gratuitously cruel. So I think it's condemning a shark fisherman versus condemning someone who keeps animals in horrendous conditions for the wildlife tourism industry, for example, is very different. So that's what I've been, for the last couple of years, I've been looking into the wildlife tourism industry. We're just releasing a feature documentary coming out soon. And what I've seen there it really makes your blood boil. The way that these animals are kept, the way that they're trained, the way that they then have to live their lives. I mean, it's if humans were subjected to that sort of treatment, then we'd call it torture. But because it's animals, and because a lot of it goes on out of sight, and somehow it's okay, and we will turn a blind eye to it. So that's really been my goal, is to try and highlight some of the atrocities within the wildlife tourism industry, because for me that's more black and white. It's more clear cut that a lot of these places simply shouldn't be allowed to operate.
Perfectly said. And that is a major issue too, is a lot of these places pretend to be eco-tourist friendly. In your experiences with what you've seen out there, can you give people warning signs if they walk into something? I mean, obviously a full exploitation of animals is a warning sign, but with what you've seen, how does that sort of work, and how can you sniff out?
Yeah, it's very easy for these places, like you said, to dress themselves up. I covered a place called Phuket Eco Safari Plus a couple of years ago, and it was the least eco, the least safari, and the least plus place you have ever visited in your entire life. It was the world's biggest shithole. So it's, people, they throw these words in there, and they think that they're somehow going to bamboozle people, and that people are stupid. And a lot of the time, the problem is that people are stupid and they do believe it. So what to look for? There are lots of warning signs. No animals at any wildlife tourism attraction should ever be ridden like elephants. There should never be any selfie opportunities. There shouldn't be any feeding of them. Really, for somewhere to be responsible, you're just observing. You're observing animals, and you're going out and you're watching them in wild or semi-wild habitat. And yes, there are instances where animals cannot be. It's not as simple as like you go and you rescue an animal from a wildlife tourism venue and then you can release it. Many people think that that's the case. Actually, sometimes you do have to have rehabilitation centres where these animals can live a nice existence in these semi-wild locations, and then people can go and observe them. The problem is that they're very few and far between. There aren't that many places that I would really recommend that people go to visit. People will say, well, don't zoos have conservation? Don't they have conservation benefits? And most of the time, 99.9% of the time, they don't. The animals that they keep aren't necessarily endangered or critically endangered. They don't really have breeding programs. There's not much education. Yes, again, there are the rare exceptions where the animals are well cared for, they're fed appropriately, they've got enough space, there is some educational value, but it's certainly not the norm. So yeah, I would just ask that people do a little bit of research beforehand, and if you can see any of these red flags, like touching, riding, feeling, selfies, then don't go.
Excellent. So there should be no interaction with you and the animals. It should be more about observing them, in a space, hopefully, where they're not even too conscious.
And it's much more rewarding. We live in a world and in a society where we just want everything instantly, and we want everything to fall on our laps. It's like a good woman. Would you rather a good woman just fell on your lap, or would you rather have to work for it? Right? Probably shouldn't say that. I hope my girlfriend's not watching. But yeah, it shouldn't just be about like wham bam. Like actually it's much more rewarding if you go out and you have to trek to see animals, or you have to you have to put in a little bit of work for your sightings. And yes, you might not get really close interactions. You might not be able to wash an elephant or scrub or feel its skin, but at least this way you're actually observing them going about their daily business. And for me, that's much richer than these manufactured interactions.
Yeah, and that is a huge difference, to meet an animal in the wild. When we were in Peru, there was a pink dolphin, which are endangered, in a small zoo. Pardon me. And the zoo was keeping him in water that was just enough that he was underwater. And he'd actually tried to commit suicide. They had speculated several times. But then 1 kilometer over, you have the Amazon River, and you have a whole bunch of them, living free. And I just always thought it was so odd how we try to hold on to animals. And, much like how circuses are now been under fire, I think we can now start to also move forward and think about zoos, think about sanctuaries, how these things are being run. And that's what I was curious to ask you about. I feel like a lot of times we view animals in a backward sense. We give our human actions onto them. We say that it's a dog eat dog. We say that sharks attack. We use these, they hunt, they kill. These are human kind of terms. And I feel like we never have allowed the reverse, where we allow the animal interaction or the animal way of being to affect how we view our own, spirit. I think that, it's sort of, we're in the middle of a changing mindset about how we should be interacting with animals. How do you see the relationship of human and animal after your experience, and how do you think we can move forward?
Yeah, I feel that since the dawn of time, humans have been eating, exploiting, or enjoying animals. Like wildlife tourism has been around for 3,500 years, since the ancient Egyptians. So cavemen were running around and they were chasing animals to kill and eat. But things are slowly changing. The world is changing, and we now know. We understand more about animal sentience and intelligence, and we know that animals, we know they suffer. We know that fish feel pain. It was always kind of this common misconception, because they can't let out a shriek or they can't make any noise, that a fish might not feel any pain. But now we know these things for an absolute fact. And our relationship with the natural world is changing. And look at the current mess that we're in with COVID. And we know that many animals are reservoirs for infectious diseases, and 75% of all new diseases come from animals. And along with that, it's the things that we put inside ourselves. We have much more knowledge about nutrition, about what's good for us, and we know that eating a chicken that's been jam-packed with millions of other chickens and not fed the right diet and hormones and all sorts, we know that it's not necessarily good for us. So we're now armed with a lot more knowledge. And I'm not telling people how to live their lives. That's not the right way to do it. My job as a photographer or as a photojournalist is to document and just to simply show people, and then let them make up their own minds. So we just need to arm people with as much information as possible, and then they can be the judge.
Yeah, and it's important because in a way it's a social re-education. We have the thoughts of yesteryear that we still are holding on to, and so as you bring more of these images out, and as you do your investigative work, it allows the conversation to grow in a public sphere. And I think that's really an important aspect of us moving forward and re-educating ourselves, to see these types of atrocities. I was looking at some of the pictures that you've got in there with some of the habitats that these animals are kept in. And there is just no, it's hard to imagine any form of where that could be justified.
Yes. It can't be, but and again, you're dealing with cultures where they don't view animal welfare in the same way that we might. Again, it just doesn't register when you sometimes when you're on assignment and people are really mistreating an animal, and you're like, "What are you doing?" They look at you like you're absolutely crazy. So they don't see that an animal has feelings or has intelligence in the same way that humans might. Whereas we now know that a dolphin or a killer whale is possibly even more intelligent. They have brains that we can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're just too smart for our own good. That's the only thing we've got going for us. In pretty much every other way, we're inferior to other animals. You know, we're brittle, we're fragile, but we have these very advanced brains, and that's going to be the why humanity is faltering now.
It's true. We always thought that the animals didn't speak because they couldn't speak our language. But you know, it's interesting that they're finding new ways of communicating. And I mean, and I know as a fellow diver, once you're underwater, you start to understand how the whole world works down there. It's a whole society, and everyone's
Look at my octopus teacher, which hopefully a lot of your viewers have seen, and then you try going off and ordering a plate of octopus at a restaurant. I think a lot of people will be thinking twice now about that, because they now understand these animals, and that's why film and photography is such an important tool to educate people. And it's great to see a film like that that's coming out and is appeals to the masses, because a lot of the time you'll be able to empathize here is that you release conservation films and they're just watched by conservationists. Right. You're preaching to the converted most of the time. So that's a challenge in our line of work, is to release this as many ways as you can through as many mediums, using as many different kinds of techniques as you can. When I cover a story, I'll always try and do it for the broadsheets, for the tabloids, do film, do as well photography, through social media, through influencers. Like as the more people who can get these messages out, the better, really.
And your work's been incredible. It has done that. It has gone to all the different social media. I mean, I know personally the images, where you have with the orangutans that are being used for entertainment, and the ones with the boxing gloves, and the variety of exploitative things that are being done that you've brought light to were things that always shocked me from where I was. How, what's the best way, if somebody's reading your book and they want to get involved somehow and help, even if they can't leave their house, do you have any recommendations for them, or ways that they can help online, find foundations? Or
everyone has a role that they can play in making the world a better place for animals. And you don't have to do what I do or what you do, which is very extreme and going out there kind of on the front line. But all small gestures are really important, whether that is sharing stories that you read on social media, whether that's just watching films and educating yourself, educating your children, donating to charitable causes. I mean, really, there's no one way to be a conservationist. There's multiple lines, and there's multiple ways that you can help to inform yourself about the plight of animals.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think everybody plays a very important role. Even my friends that just pass on an image, that's important, because that's the same as having a conversation with somebody, and because the pictures always, speak 1,000 words. And I think that it's very important, because as long as we allow these conversations to continue, then I think the answers are going to start to grow and grow. And, I feel like we're at a very exciting time. People are often feel overwhelmed in conservation, because they feel like they don't want to even look, because, oh my gosh, everything's going extinct, and what can I do? But people always have to remember, you can have a huge impact, no matter if you're at your house or you're out in the field. We all are part of one gigantic army.
And things are slowly changing. David Attenborough just did his first proper conservation documentary in England, which had a huge audience, and it's good that he's now coming out and he's actually speaking because a lot of the time the BBC didn't want to touch these stories. They you'd go and pitch a conservation show to one of the big broadcasters, and they'd be like, "Nah, ugh, this is scary, or it's boring, or it's dangerous, and people just want to be entertained." Whereas I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. And people are becoming more aware of these issues, particularly younger generations now. They're coming out and they're eco warriors, and it's great when you're meeting younger people, and the amount who you meet who are vegan or who go out and they march. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And we have people like Greta to thank for that, for starting the conversation. And long may it continue.
Yes. Yeah. Beautifully said. And it is true. It's a growing, I mean, when I was growing up, it was not a very popular thing to talk about. You know, nobody really did it. And one thing, Aaron, I want to really say, and you probably don't even notice this because, you know, we're always out in the field working, but you hit on a good point. You know, entertainment in its own will not tell us these stories. You know, Discovery Channel is very limited on what they will allow to be shown. They usually will turn down pitches for the more difficult stories. So, you know, one thing that I think is incredible is that there's been a rise in consciousness of, you know, for example, you go out with a camera and then you figure out where it goes. And that is a new form of journalism that's very important because you have gotten the message out, even though the majority of the mainstream has tried to stop that message from being seen. So that work is, you know, I thank you for that, because that is a new way of working.
It is. That's the hardest thing, is you can go, and that's something that people in my industry have been struggling with for a long time, is you can go and you have the stories, but then how do you actually get people to see them? So that's when, social media really is a very powerful tool at our disposal, and it's good. I've got a kind of small but loyal following, and if I release a story, I know that it has the opportunity to get seen by 1 million people within a couple of weeks, because the people who are following my stories are sharing it, and they're sharing it on different platforms. And it's nice to know that you can actually get stories out to a lot of people quite quickly. What then happens is that's kind of out of my hands, and you can sometimes get stick or criticism from people saying, so what are you doing then? What are you doing? Are you going to go rescue these animals? Or sometimes you'd be amazed at how often I hear, like, how dare you just go and document these animals and not save them? I mean, the stupidity of people that just is absolutely mind blowing. But what I just say a lot, I try and just, I think it's the role of photojournalists is just to try and just to document, and then to release matter of fact accounts of what you have witnessed. And then a lot of the time the images do the talking, and then you see the shitstorm that follows, and hopefully then there is action. I just released a story about Vietnam and Saigon Zoo, and the fuss that caused, and the personal abuse that I got from the Vietnamese was quite astounding, really. And then what happens? And then World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, they do an investigation, and it means that Saigon Zoo know that there's more of a spotlight on them, so they're more careful, and hopefully they will then treat their animals a little bit better. So that ultimately that's what you want, is you want eyes on your work. You want as many people to see your shots as possible. Hopefully I'm getting there in terms of that. I'm not very social media savvy. I don't like doing it. I find all the world of social media is a bit repulsive in some ways, but it's a necessary evil in this world.
It is. It's easier to get information, through with that. And we actually have Phu Phan Tan, who is from Vietnam. I spent a little time over there in Phan Tet, in one of the fishing villages. And Phil, I'd love to know your thoughts on the zoo as well. And Aaron, that's an interesting thing, because what we do is, Molly shared it for us. Thank you, Molly. What I think what's important is these businesses understand now that we have an eco consciousness, and they want to adapt, and they want to keep us around. They don't want to lose our business. So we have to find, and it's like you're saying, like, we can't just pull the animals out of those conditions. It's not going to change things. We have to change the way that businesses are run, the way that we treat the animals in general. And the only way to do that is to bring all the stakeholders in. And often it's what are the, those bad guys that are doing that. If we can demand or somehow create where they must abide by guidelines because we know that they're not going to do it on their own, then it might give us hope, either that or have to get rid of, they should be getting rid of, I think, animal exploitation at all. I mean, we're at a new phase, where it's not, I'm just going through real fast. All of our listeners always come in and add a couple comments here. Mitch says, so true. We have to eat and we'll do what to survive and feed our families. Although the opposite side of that is greed, unfortunately. Bruce says, you guys do brilliant work. Wish I had half your enthusiasm. Bruce, you do. You're always on the show. You're in Scotland and you're always promoting our work and you're always promoting environmentalism and being conscious of animals. So that alone is exactly the same thing that we try to do in our own way. Romania.
I don't understand Romanian, unfortunately.
That's let's see. That's Bună ziua is a good day from Romania, and there's Camilla who does a lot of animal rights work in the UK actually, and Mitch and guys. By the way, you can go to Aaron's website, and I want to talk next about and Molly. If you'd like to see Aaron's photos, they are incredible. Go to his website. It's his name. And I actually have it. Let's see. I've got it right here. We can show you. And I'm just going to let that scroll down there for a minute. Please go to his website. His work is incredible. The shark finning photo you have on there, Aaron, just gets me every time. Having seen animals without fins as an issue. Bruce is asking can they follow you on YouTube? Yeah.
So the best place to see my projects is scubazoo.tv.
Let me add that into the chat.
Let me just double check that. I spent 4 years living in Borneo. I'm just double checking it on my phone, where I presented conservation shows. scubazoo.tv. And I presented conservation shows, and I'd love to know what you guys think of them. We did maybe 100 different episodes, did different stories where I trained to be a wildlife ranger in Borneo. I did a series about a group of scientists who lived on the banks of a famous river in Borneo, studying all these crazy animals. I did a series called Borneo from Below. I did Indonesia from below, Timor-Leste from below. And they're very much like bite-sized, fun, short episodes focused on different issues, and they've all got conservation kind of running through. The theme is conservation, but we realized that people wanted to be entertained at the same time, so there's a lot of fun and silliness and alliteration and puns, and beautifully shot. I've got a very talented director called Will Foster Grundy, and people seem to really kind of like those shows. So it was a way of trying to get particularly like younger audiences involved in conservation without ramming it down their throats, without making people feel depressed. Kind of subliminal education or fun-servation.
I like that, actually. I like that a lot.
My colleagues hate fun-servation, but I'm sticking to it. So yeah, you can watch that. I've also, on my website, there's a load of episodes, a load of things that I've presented. A film I've just been making about orangutans in the wildlife tourism industry. That's less kind of upbeat. That's a 3-year investigation into orangutans used in the tourism industry. A labor of love that has it's broken myself and my crew. But that's just in the final stages of edit. 3 years. 3 years in the making, and we're looking forward to that being on TV very soon. It's been a real passion project. So it's exciting to see it come together.
I am, I can only imagine how hard it must be to be working on that. I mean, not only shooting it, but also, having to revisit those emotions every time you edit and every time you work on it and every image. And that's one of the images I believe that's on your new book, Animosity.
That's right. Yes.
And I'd like to quickly talk about that as well. I put the link down here for everybody to go to scubazoo.tv, go check out Aaron's work. it's incredible. And, you know, the best thing is it's a nice way to explore all these aspects of conservation without, you know, it's a new approach. It's not a guilt approach of bring, you know, want everybody to enjoy it as much as we love it.
Right.
Let's see. All right, there we go. But yeah, so you know what I was going to say is your book. If you could just tell us about what the new book is. And
yeah, so the new book is something that I've wanted to do now for many years, but it was just never the right opportunity. But with lockdown happening a few months ago, I got approached by a publisher who'd seen my images and read my stories and said, look, would you be interested in making this into a book? And it was just perfect timing. Everyone's talking about these issues now. They're really in the public domain. I couldn't go on location. I also had pneumonia and I got very sick just before lockdown. So all the stars just aligned. So the book is going to be a collection of stories, kind of from the front line of conservation. So looking at stories I've covered down the years, whether it was going on an undercover mission to expose the seal cull in Namibia, training as a anti-poaching ranger in Borneo, working on the shark finning camps in Mozambique, going to Madagascar to track the tortoise mafia through their sacred forests, looking at the wildlife tourism industry, looking at the exotic pet trade and otters being used as exotic pets, snakes being used as exotic pets, voodoo markets in West Africa. And it's really as much as it's not just a coffee table book. It's a book of adventures. It's a book that highlights some of the most pertinent conservation issues of our times, and also some of the people who are working to try and make the world a better place and to combat these issues. So it's not just all doom and gloom. I think some stories do showcase some of these amazing individuals I've met down the years. So it's kind of it's almost like a cross between a coffee table book and a magazine like Nat Geo. So yeah, lots of big, bold, hard-hitting images about 15 stories that I've worked on down the years. It's really been my heart and soul has been poured out into these jobs, and I think they're I might be biased in saying this, but I think they're really fascinating, multifaceted, completely complex issues, all highlighted with quite dramatic imagery. I give a lot of photo tips in there as well. So for people who are interested in photography, it's not your traditional coffee table book. It's something that I hope that people will get a lot more from, not just about flicking through and seeing these pictures, but also reading about these fascinating issues. So the book can be, we've got an Indiegogo campaign up at the moment. I don't know, Eric, whether you might be able to broadcast that. It's on my Facebook page.
Let's see.
So yeah, we've got an Indiegogo campaign where people can get the book and they get a discount if it's ordered now. It's coming out in November. You can also get limited editions. There's limited edition prints on there. And then the book will be out in November on Amazon. It's massively exciting seeing it all come together. It's my first book. I've not had time really to work on something like this because I'm constantly out in the field. So to actually have 6 months down and be like, okay, you can't bugger off to the jungle because your lungs have collapsed and you've been locked in your country. It was really a perfect time to do this. It's quite exposing doing this sort of books, but because it is this is my soul in 200 glossy pages, and whatever happens in life, this is something that you can say, look, this is a small, hopefully a small impact that you might have made in the world. So it was I'm not expecting it to be a bestseller, but it was as much doing it for myself as trying to get sales. Obviously, I want as many people to read it as possible. But I understand that these are also very hard images to look at sometimes, and they're not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah, I saw a few of them in there, and they definitely reminded me of some of the harder things that you see when you're in the field. And I think this book, it sounds like it's more of a mix of a coffee table and a college education course in
Yes, yeah,
conservation,
that's
because
welcome.
that I know that every page cost you a pound of flesh and a lot of heartache and a lot of there's a lot of pain that of what we see in the field that we have to assimilate and then find a way to share. So I'm very excited to read your book, and I wanted to thank you for putting it together, because I think it will bring in a lot of things that are very fragmented into one place that people can have sort of an encyclopedia of these are the problems right now. And there's just too much fragmentation. So I'm glad you've brought it under one umbrella.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. So there's all of these different industries within one book, whether you're looking at overexploitation, overfishing, the exotic pet trade, the illegal wildlife trade, the wildlife tourism industry. You have all of these very complicated issues, or at least case studies of these very complex issues, all in one place. So yeah, I really hope that people enjoy reading, or if they don't enjoy it, that they take something out of it at least, and it moves people and moves people into action.
And everybody, I put the link in the chat so you can click on the link and go right to the Indiegogo project, or you can go to Aaron's site and also lead through it. And I said, the images that you put up as previews were very, they tell a story. And it's also something that's not easy to do with one image, but you do it beautifully. I was going to ask also, before I wrap up the show, I always like to ask, there's always people watching that are thinking to themselves, they're younger. Maybe I'm going to go out and do this, pick up the camera, go out and make a difference. I want to go out and make a difference. Do you have advice for people that are interested in, jumping into the front lines of conservation?
Yeah, be a doctor instead. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Good advice.
Quit now. Quit whilst you're ahead. Do I have any advice? Look, this industry has always been difficult. It's so difficult to get a foot in, and it's becoming tougher by the minute because content is given for free now, and you can't make, it's just very hard to make a living as a photojournalist and a conservation filmmaker and doing these passion projects. But saying that, if you are incredibly dedicated, you're hardworking, you're smart, you're resourceful, you're talented, then you can carve a niche for yourself. But that involves really a lot of hard work, many years of doing projects for free. So I would often say that you need an alternative source of income. Excuse me. Also involves shadowing and volunteering with people that you admire and whose work that you like. And really, I've got a brilliant girl at the moment who's kind of interning with me, and she's just shown absolutely the right attitude. It's just like, what can I do? What can I do? Tell me. Like, you need stuff transcribing, you need retouching, you need photo assisting, and it's just like, someone like her, you can see is going to go really far in the industry because they just show the right attitude. And a lot of the time it's about because this is an industry where you go out and you work on location all the time and you're in close quarters with people. You have to be easy to get along with and work with. So yeah, I would say it's also practice, learning, absorbing, watching YouTube tutorials, reading books like mine, going out and digesting all of your favorite photographers' work, and having an analytical approach, like looking at these images, what works, what doesn't work, what do you like, can you manage to get your own unique style? So yeah, all of these things, it's not something that will come overnight. It is many years of hard work. But then eventually you will start and you will carve your own niche, and you'll find out what it is that you want to do. Do you want to be involved in production? Do you want to be a photographer? Do you want to be a writer? Do you want to be a director? So yeah, that's my advice really. Go out, learn as much as you can, absorb, be helpful, and practice.
Excellent. And that's great because, you know, it's exciting. It's a brand new thing that's forming, and we've got a whole new generation that's going to come up and you know, pick up the work. So I'm excited for now and for the future.
Yeah, me too. It's nice to see that change is happening. It's taken a long time for people to wake up, but things are moving in the right direction.
It is. You can feel it. It's a good momentum, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure to have you on, to talk to you. Like I said, I'm a big fan of your work, and you know, I really thank you. You know, because it really has brought attention to a lot of stories people wouldn't know otherwise, and they're stories that will change how the world runs.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate you having me on, and thanks for all your hard work as well.
Yeah, man. Thank you, and maybe we'll get you back on again.
Thanks a lot. See ya.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was Aaron Gekoski. Please go to his website. You will be very happy that you went there and check it out. I'm going to put it on the bottom again. He has worked extremely hard. He has spent his life devoted to bringing images. And trust me, when you have to go into these difficult circumstances and you have to get intimate enough with the people that are doing wrong to get the images back out, and you have to put yourself in very, very conflicting issues emotionally, physically, personally, in order to serve a greater cause, which is to help the animals, which is what we are all here for. So I want to thank everybody for being on today and joining us. Thank you so much, Mitch. Exactly. We have to work together. Cooperation is the key. And, you know, I encourage everybody to go check out Animosity, Aaron's book. It has some of the most amazing images and some of the worst issues that we do need to tackle right now in our society, in our world, in a way that we can look forward and try to move forward in a positive fashion. So thanks everybody for being in. This was really good to be back. I missed everybody last week, and take care, everybody. We'll see you again next week. Remember, it's our world. Let's talk about it.